Some episodes of Star Trek are classics not only for their dramatic merits, but for the lasting contributions they make to the series and the franchise as a whole. Errand of Mercy introduces the Klingons, Tomorrow is Yesterday introduces slingshotting around a star to time travel, and Amok Time introduces da 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 da. This is a review of my favorite episode of Star Trek The Original Series, Amok Time. If you have not seen this episode and you don't want to know what happens in it, be warned, spoilers beyond this point. There are so many reasons why this is my favorite episode of classic Trek. If I could distill all of those reasons down into just one or two essentials, I suppose they would be, one, it exemplifies the wide open, anything goes, we're making this up as we go along quality that the original series has, that no show in the franchise following it has quite been able to recapture or even tried to recapture. And two, it has some of the most enjoyable and also some of the most affecting moments between our major characters. So let's start with the first one. Presumably, Theodore Sturgeon, the writer of this episode, walked into Gene Roddenberry's office at some point and said, "Hey, what if Spock has to return to his home planet to mate every 7 years like a salmon? And if he doesn't do it, he dies." Or maybe it was Roddenberry's idea and he assigned it to Sturgeon or somebody else's idea. The point is, someone brought it up and Roddenberry and the other producers of the series said, "Yeah, let's go for it." And Sturgeon is writing the script and he thinks, what if it turns out Vulcans just completely abandon their logical ways during their mating season? And Spock becomes an angry jerk in the days leading up to his arrival at Vulcan. And what if they practice arranged marriage? And what if they have a goofy ceremony as part of the mating ritual with a big gong and tiny bells and armed guards and an old Vulcan sorceress presiding over it all? Like he's just making this stuff up. And it's nuts. And now it's a thing in Star Trek. Vulcans control their emotions and they're calm and logical. And also every 7 years they get so horny that they go crazy and it will kill them if they don't get laid. Excellent. The episode establishes other now familiar bits of Vulcan culture. This is the first time we see the Vulcan salute. This is the first time we hear someone say live long and prosper. But that's the seasoning, not the steak. Amok Time isn't my favorite episode because it's the first time someone does this here. It's my favorite episode because it does a good job building up tension and anticipation in the first half and then blows off that tension and anticipation with a barrage of silliness that is as entertaining as anything the series ever does. And when I call it silliness, I want to stress that it's not being played for laughs. Amok Time has several excellent jokes that land really well, but it's not a comedy. It's also not quite camp, though it comes close at times. It's ostensibly serious. The stakes are high, but it's just fun. A big factor in how fun it is and how good it is overall is that second reason I mentioned. It's written with an eye toward its characters. The relationship between Kirk and Spock moves front and center for this one. Spock is clearly going through some things. He asks Kirk to be dropped off at Vulcan. Kirk understandably would like to know why. Spock refuses to explain. Kirk is ordered to take the Enterprise to another planet for a diplomatic duty, which will prevent them from taking Spock to Vulcan. McCoy discovers that if Spock doesn't get to Vulcan in the next few days, he will die. So Kirk risks his own career and disobeys orders to take Spock to Vulcan. This is all in the first half, the rising action, if I can get all screenwritery on you. It threatens to drag a few times, but keeps things interesting and continues to build that anticipation by first teasing out the reveal of what is actually going on with Spock. It's not immediately apparent that his problem is he's about to become too horny to live. And then by introducing uncertainty as to whether or not the Enterprise will be able to go to Vulcan, and imposing that choice on Kirk. Follow orders or help Spock. The writers of classic Trek loved to find excuses to have Spock behave out of character, and Amok time is the best result of that preoccupation. Not only is the reason for Spock's unusual behavior compelling and, as I said before, goofy as hell, but those scenes before the Enterprise arrives at Vulcan give Leonard Nimoy the opportunity to do some of his best work in the series. There are a few times where Spock erupts in anger, but most of the time he's struggling to maintain control, and Nimoy plays those scenes beautifully. He also gets to show us Spock's reluctance and palpable discomfort when he has to explain to Kirk exactly what is going on. As absurd as the situation is, there is a note of truth underneath Nimoy's performance that elevates the scene above the silliness. Spock is an intensely private person, at least about this subject, and it seems to actually hurt him to have to tell Kirk about his condition and Vulcan mating rituals and all of that. Revealing this information goes against everything he's ever been taught and every instinct he has. If you've ever had to talk to someone about something very personal that you really didn't want to talk about but felt you had to talk about, perhaps you recognize Spock's combination of trepidation and irritation and impatience to get this over with. I know I do. William Shatner also gets to show us how important Spock is to Kirk. We see him agonizing over his decision, having second thoughts about not diverting to Vulcan, even before he knows that it's a life or death thing for Spock. And after McCoy tells him that Spock needs to get to Vulcan or die, Kirk says to McCoy of Spock, "I owe him my life a dozen times over. Isn't that worth a career? He's my friend." Kirk is so committed to helping Spock that he talks himself into participating in the episode's climax, which ties back into the first reason I love the episode and its general wackiness, because it's almost too wacky to be believed. Apparently, if the wife-to-be in the Vulcan arranged marriage changes her mind and doesn't want to marry the dude to whom she's betrothed, she can call for a challenge. Physical combat. But instead of selecting hunky Vulcan lunkhead Stan as her champion, Spock's fiancée T'Pring chooses Captain Kirk. Spock needs to return to Vulcan to take a mate or he'll die, but it turns out that's all just an excuse to get Spock and Kirk to fight each other. Now that is some splendidly batshit sci-fi action-adventure writing. Spock, deep in the blood fever, almost out of his mind with lust, for sex, for violence, for something. He just wants to feel alive. Anyway, he goes up to T'Pau and pleads with her not to let Kirk fight because he knows he'll have to kill Kirk to win. And in his crazed state of mind, he'll totally do it. But T'Pau allows the fight anyway. And it's the Star Trek fight of all Star Trek fights, with the music and Kirk's shirt getting ripped and the obvious stunt doubles, though not as obvious as elsewhere in the series. The fight scene is very well shot. There's a brief respite in the middle where Kirk and McCoy have one of my favorite exchanges of the entire series, when McCoy says, "You're gonna have to kill him, Jim," and an exhausted Kirk answers, "Kill Spock? Not what we came to Vulcan for, is it?" DeForest Kelley is excellent as McCoy throughout the episode, by the way. That probably should go without saying because he's always excellent, but since I've singled out both Nimoy and Shatner for praise, it seems only fair to mention him too. Anyway, the fight ends with Spock apparently killing Kirk, but of course that's not the end. That's not the catharsis the episode has been building to. Spock is bummed out about killing Kirk. He gets an explanation from T'Pring about the challenge. She says she wanted to marry Stan instead of him and figured getting him to fight his own captain and friend would be the best way to get Spock to break up with her without violating any Vulcan customs. Spock's like, "Yeah, that's good thinking." He gives T'Pau a final no-touch high-five and beams back up to the Enterprise, expecting to turn himself into the authorities for that murder he just did. Oh, and one more fun little detail. After the fight, Spock was back to his old self. Apparently, beating someone to death is just as good as sex for clearing up the old mating season blood fever. Thanks, Star Trek. Then comes what we've all been waiting for, even though we didn't know we were waiting for it. Spock's back on the Enterprise. He goes to sick bay, starts telling Dr. McCoy about how he's going to turn himself in and how Scotty's going to have to take command of the Enterprise. And then Captain Kirk, alive and well, comes walking in like, don't you think you should check with me first? It turns out when McCoy gave Kirk a shot during the fight to help him breathe better in the thin Vulcan air, he also gave him a dose of fake death juice, so that it only seemed like Spock had killed him. Spock is so surprised to see Kirk alive that he grabs him and breaks into a huge Leonard Nimoy smile and exclaims, "Jim!" And then he immediately winds back to Spock mode, like, "I'm pleased to see you, Captain." It's fantastic. So, yeah, a well-built but very silly plot, shamelessly contrived to lead to a Kirk versus Spock fight that you totally don't see coming the first time you watch it, filled with good acting and character beats that are both meaningful and highly entertaining. It's a terrific episode, featuring pretty much everything I love about Star Trek, apart from social political commentary, of which there is none to speak of, in a single hour. What's not to love here? Those are my thoughts on Amok Time, my favorite episode of Star Trek The Original Series. Is it your favorite episode? If not, what is? Please do share your thoughts in the comments. If you'd like to support this channel, and I sure wish you would, if you can afford it, you can do so by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Steve Shives, becoming a channel member by clicking the join button, or by making a one-time gift by clicking the thanks button, or via PayPal or Venmo. Links are in the description. Don't forget to watch my review of the first episode of Season 3 of Star Trek Picard coming this weekend. I'm teaming up with my best friend and podcast co-host, Jason Harding, to review this final season of Picard, and our first review should be up sometime on Saturday. And please join me again this time next week for another retro review. Next time, it'll be my favorite episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, the two-parter Chain of Command. I'll see you then. Thanks for watching, and take care, everybody.